Something else that I found interesting is kind of this arrow thing that came up with Sean Kirkpatrick and this report. He did this interview, and it's probably one of the funniest pictures I've seen since I've, been running vetted, is the picture you released after Sean Kirkpatrick said, I didn't go to any meeting with Brandon Fugal.
Yeah.
And then,
So
you threw out that picture, and he's got this look like the villain look. Like, I thought, oh my God, what a mic drop, Brandon. I was just like, bam, that was so good.
Yeah. Well, like someone's photographing me here. I can.
Yeah.
Well, here you have Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who was appointed the task of leading the most recent mandated review by Congress relative to these topics, the UFO phenomena and other high strangeness. And he goes on record with the New York Post stating that, number one, he'd never met me. He didn't even know who I was. He'd never met Brandon Fugal. Number two, he'd never attended a briefing relative to Skinwalker Ranch in his life. Number three, he stated unambiguously that he had no interest in these topics before 2022. And here we have a briefing in April of 2018. In April of 2018, we are summoned to D.C., to Washington, D.C., to provide testimony to certain committees where he was in attendance. And we spent 2.5 hours in that briefing. And I sat right across from him. I mean, we're talking eye to eye, right across from each other for 2.5 hours. And that briefing was 100% specific to Skinwalker Ranch. It had, I think, about 55 very detailed slides in the keynote presentation that also included video and data documenting not only the reality of the UFO phenomena and sightings and activity on Skinwalker Ranch, but also acute medical episodes that have occurred and the documentation associated with those acute medical episodes, as well as electromagnetic anomalies and phenomena that seem to attend much of the activity, that provide a fingerprint, if you will. So Dr. Kirkpatrick, for whatever reason, has selective amnesia, that he'd never met me, pleaded ignorance, and that he'd never attended a briefing relative to Skinwalker Ranch or never had any interest in these topics before 2022, yet he's attending a confidential briefing in Washington, D.C. that we had carefully orchestrated over weeks, that people had been given notice. This was very formal and very specific. And I didn't want to provide the picture. I didn't want to post a picture or any of the visual evidence that this briefing took place on social media, to be quite candid. In fact, I emailed Stephen Greenstreet and I said, what are you trying to do? Why are you pursuing this line of accusation? Are you trying to ruin this man's credibility? I have nothing against Dr. Kirkpatrick. I have no idea what his motives may be, what would lead him to claim that he never met me, never attended a briefing. I have no idea what kind of pressure this man is under. And yet you continue to push this agenda. And I pleaded with him. I said, please don't proceed with this. And yet they go ahead and they drop this story and essentially claim that I'm a liar, that I'm bearing false witness, and saying, well, who are you going to believe? You know, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, credentialed Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who's been assigned the task of leading the Arrow report and the comprehensive review of these topics? Or are you going to believe some real estate entrepreneur who owns some so-called spooky ranch in Utah? And that's the way that it was framed, and it pissed me off. I felt like it was not only dishonest, but it was hostile and it was inappropriate. So I was forced to post the receipts. I had to bring the receipts and show, A, the briefing really did take place, and it was specific to Skinwalker Ranch, and I posted images of the slides from that briefing. B, Dr. Kirkpatrick was not only there, but he was sitting right across from me, as evidenced by the photographic evidence that was taken. And C, there was great interest in these topics prior to 2022, going back to at least specific to Skinwalker Ranch, going back to 2018 and before, that led up to being summoned to DC to give this briefing with my principal investigator, Eric Bard, Dr. Jim Segala, who'd been consulting with us for quite some time. Again, all of this predates any television docuseries. We hadn't had any discussions with the History Channel. We hadn't proceeded down this path of allowing the investigation to be documented. This was all private. My identity was absolutely secret, confidential. As the owner of the ranch, I wanted my name nowhere in the public domain attached to these topics. And I was providing this data and this evidence as a patriot, as someone who really does believe that people deserve to know the truth, and I love our country. If this is a foreign adversary, if this is China or Russia that has access to this technology and is deploying it on our soil, and creating phenomena that defy any natural explanation, then we're in big trouble.